guys, it's Lord Botha here with another video, and Lord of the Rings of Power. I don't like calling it Lord of the Rings even. It's a show that I haven't really been covering. I think I've made one video on it about how it has terrible ratings, and guess what? More ratings information has came in, and again, it's not good. Lord of the Rings of Power, back on Nielsen charts in Season 2 debut, crossing 1 billion minutes viewed. This comes to us from Deadline, and that sounds like a pretty good headline, right? 1 billion minutes viewed, that's pretty good numbers, you would think. Until you dive deeper into the actual numbers and realize that this is actually a steep decline from last season. The series drew just over 1 billion minutes viewed from August 26th to September 1st, with 3 new episodes launching on August 29th, putting it at number 2 on the overall list. Nielsen does not separate titles by season, but the company did say that about 70% of the viewing for the interval came from the new episodes. So that's important information there. That means that 30% of the numbers that came from this were viewings of the previous season. So people probably going back and watching the first season, trying to remember, catch up with the first season of Rings of Power leading into the next season, right? Which makes sense. A lot of people do that, especially when you have a show like Rings of Power in which the vast majority of people did not finish the whole first season. So with the premiere of Season 2 coming about, they were probably like, oh, I never actually did finish the first season of that show, did I? I should probably go back and watch that if I'm gonna see the premiere of Season 2. That's a decline from Season 1's debut week when the series racked up more than 1.2 billion minutes viewed across 2 episodes, as opposed to the 11 that became available during this interval. Those 2 episodes also premiered midweek, meaning that Season 1 had just 4 days to rack up that total across 2 episodes. So what is that saying? That's saying that when the first season premiered, it only premiered 2 episodes. It had a lot shorter of a week to get the numbers that it got, and it got to 1.2 billion viewed, while this season's premiere only got 1 billion, and they had an extra episode, 3 episodes instead of 2, and they had extra time, extra days to do it. So as far as premieres go, they increased the number of episodes in their premiere and the length of time in which their premiere lasts. So you would expect them to actually get a larger number than the first season premiere. But in actuality, it didn't. It got a little bit less, 1 instead of 1.2. And that, quite honestly, is not good. It's a horrible return on your investment when you consider the fact that the first season cost about $700 million, and this season cost about $400 million, over $400 million. So Amazon has spent over $1 billion on this thing, and all its ratings seem to do is continue to decline. The article also states the biggest caveat here is that Nielsen only measures US viewing, which means that any global audience isn't accounted for. According to Amazon, about 70% of the audience of Rings of Power comes from outside the US. So the company selling a product that's doing terribly in the United States says, nah, it's doing fine because most of the people buying the product are from outside the United States. Oh, cool. Can we see how you track those numbers? Guess what? They haven't been shown to us. Amazon is saying, trust me, bro. And quite honestly, it's easy to understand why the ratings are down. Because this show is about as Lord of the Rings as I am to an actual live elf. The show looks cheap, has dumb, contrived, and at times confusing storylines, seems to somehow lack purpose in a lot of its storylines, despite having the entire world and plot written out for them by Tolkien, and the showrunners have taken the show in a completely wrong direction, stating things like canon doesn't really have to be followed, and essentially confirming that the show is for shippers now. Because that's what people are talking about online about this show, the few fans that it has, are who is shipping who with who. Galadriel with Sauron, Sauron with Celebrimbor, Elrond with Durin. It doesn't make any sense. Lord of the Rings isn't about shipping. It's about a religious allegory between good and evil. This is one of the main reasons I'm not reviewing or covering this show. I grew up with Lord of the Rings, the original trilogy. It was something sacred to me, part of my childhood. I loved it. My mother loved it. My grandmother loved it. We played Into the West at my grandmother's funeral. We were an extended versions only household. To see something like this treated so trivially, it's just something I can't bear. And then in the most recent episode 7 that they've released, they have Elrond sharing a kiss with Galadriel. To put this into perspective for you people who don't know the lore, Elrond is supposed to be married to Galadriel's daughter, who is supposed to exist during this point and be a grown woman. So essentially, Elrond is out here making out with his mother-in-law. Everyone who saw this, by the way, cringed and hated it. Even long-term shill pages like Fellowship of the Fans were out here making lengthy posts about how the kiss doesn't make sense, was unneeded, and doesn't fit the core lore of Lord of the Rings at all. Essentially, the kiss was a bridge too far for everybody. But the showrunners do not care, and all of the actors are far too small time to actually raise a stink about this because they want to continue to get jobs and work in movies and in television, and quite honestly, Amazon is looked down on by Hollywood. They're not taken seriously, despite the fact that they've thrown over $1 billion in trying to make the most expensive TV show ever. And why are they looked down upon? Because they've spent all that money and this is the shit that they've created. This show that calls itself Lord of the Rings, but in actuality, it's just Outlander with a Lord of the Rings skin on it. Now, there's nothing wrong with liking Outlander. My wife is a fan of the initial seasons of Outlander. I watched a few episodes of it with her. I thought it was okay. For being a romance set in the 1600s, I believe, Scotland, and the whole time-traveling element thing, whatever, I thought it was okay. And there are people who are fans of that show that were constantly online shipping people. But guess what? That's a romance show. Lord of the Rings is not a romance story. There's barely any romance in the story. There are some stories within Lord of the Rings that are based around romance. Hell, if you wanted to do a romantic story in the Lord of the Rings universe, do Beren and Luthien. But this, the War of the Ring? That's not it, bro. And that's why this show is failing. They do not and don't care to understand the actual audience who are fans of this IP. And it's also why I don't think this show is going to get to 5 seasons. It's either going to get 5 seasons and they're going to be super short, 4 episodes, something like that, or they're going to switch to 3 seasons and they're just going to jam-pack season 3. But it's not going to get the same amount of episodes and content that they originally thought they were going to get out of it. And at the end of the day, this is just going to be a failed adaptation of something Tolkien, just like there's been numerous other failed adaptations of something Tolkien, and hopefully this will be far more forgotten than even those were. But those are just my thoughts on the subject. If you have your own thoughts, go ahead and leave them in the comments. If you like this video, go ahead and like, share, and subscribe. If you didn't like this video, I appreciate you watching all of it, and we'll talk to you again later.